If you want to learn something new or useless about the world around you, why don't you try listening to the Banyu Podcast Reflushed on Spotify, Anchor, or any podcast app that you use? For more local podcasts, check out more shows from Pilipinas Indie Podcast and Entertainment Network. Hype Network presents.
Welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. This is the LTG Show Podcast.
Holy shit, hindi pala ako naka-on. Ayun na yan. Kasi nag-iba ako na setup. So, welcome to your unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. And this is the MTJ Show Podcast or Wrestling Podcast. Ito So, itong episode na to ngayong linggo, try ako ng bagong setup. Kasi ang hirap nung setup ko, di ako marinig sa mic last time. Try ako mag-figure out kung paano ko kakalikutin everything, almost everything. Almost everything kailangan ko kalikutin from start to finish on huling-huli kong episode. No? And figure out ko, wala pala sa mic ang problema, ang mic sa akin. So sige na, let's start the podcast na with our Wrestle Kingdom. Kasi we're going to talk about Wrestle Kingdom as well as we're going to talk about Hard to Kill pay-per-view since ito yung latest rather than the Hard to Kill event, the Wrestle Kingdom event. Mas maaga ang late ang Hard to Kill, kaya uunahin natin ang Hard to Kill pay-per-view. And then we're going to talk about, of course, the happenings for the past 2 weeks since hindi tayo gano'n nag-podcast, nag-review for the past 2 weeks. So that's why sasama natin siya today on this week's episode. Sasama natin dito yung mga important details from dito, yung Battle of the Belts. Sama din natin yung New Year's Evil. At saka yung ating Throwback Thursday, Throwback Friday, Flashback, whatever. Kung anong tawag nyo sa mga Friday na yan. Basta importante, may segment tayo today. We're going to talk about NXT UK pay-per-views a little bit. Kasi may balita na they're going to drop the pay-per-views for good. Since wala pa naman confirmations na pati ang UK ay maapektuhan din doon sa 2.0 effect. Pero before we start this episode, gusto ko masabihin sa inyo na our Lazada link is still there and available pa din if you want to shop on Lazada. Syempre, nasa Lazada yan. Lalo ng ngayong January 15 kasi January 15 is a payday sale. Kaya if you want to support the podcast, please use my link, padlink.co/6gs. Again, that's padlink.co/6gs. Every purchase nyo makakatulong yan here on the podcast. So please use my links on the description below. Okay. Hard to Kill pay-per-view. So nangyari to last Sunday, Manila time. And I'm not going to explain anything. Everything, I mean. Kasi haba yung episode natin. It's gonna be a big episode. And I don't have any time to talk anything about this pay-per-view. But idaan natin, i-score natin. Since nag-score ako 2 nights. Wow, 2 nights Actually, nag-score ako lahat ng nights from Hard to Kill. 2 nights ng Wrestle Kingdom. Wala akong night 3. history. As alam niyo naman yung history ng podcast pag may outside ng New Japan. Naalala ko tuloy yung isang episode na walang listen kahit isa. Na hindi ko muna talaga ginagalaw yung mga episodes. Or di ako nag-ATD, di ako ATD is on hold for now. Next week siguro gagawa ko isang episode. Kasi next week na ang Royal Rumble and mag-expect ako ng mas matindi na. And sige na, let's start our podcast since it's gonna be a long episode. Unahin natin ang Hard to Kill pay-per-view. So nag-open yung mismong pay-per-view. In-announce nila na si Tom Hanipa na ang magiging play-by-play commentator ng Impact Wrestling. So that's a big upgrade kay Matt Striker and kay Josh Matthews na pumalit din sa kanya eventually. That's a big upgrade yan, para sa akin. Kasi ang dating sa akin ito is parang naging NXT na yung commentary ng Impact. And syempre magkiting din ako sa Impact kasi maganda din yung naging pay-per-view nila last Sunday. Kaya wala rin akong ibang masasabing masama masyado about their setup, about their BS, and anything. And kung paano nila na-build up yung pay-per-view. Kasi not bad lang. Hindi ko pwede sabihin na it's a bad pay-per-view unlike WWE how kung paano sila nag-build ng pay-per-views. And iba nang usapan yun. Okay na. Sige na, so nag-open yung pay-per-view with the Knockouts Ultimate X match. So it's almost the same as the men's Ultimate X matches. But this time, maganda yung maganda yung naging set nila dito since it's the first Ultimate X match with the winner will get the Impact Knockouts title opportunity. So ang nanalo dito actually si Tasha Steelz. So that's a good touch for me. Matagal na rin siya nag-work sa Impact. Kung nandito si Kiera Hogan, feeling ko si Kiera yung mananalo dito. Kaso wala eh. I don't blame her though. Kung ano yung ginagawa mo sa AEW, I don't know then. To be honest. Pero wala rin akong pake. Kasi wala eh. Sinayang mo yung shot mo dun. Dapat ikaw na yung susunod na Mickie James, susunod na Gail Kim, or susunod na Diona. So wala eh. Minaced mo yung shit eh. Nag-AEW ka agad eh. Sige. So the match, personally, yung Knockouts Ultimate X match, it's not that bad. Hindi rin gano'ng kagandahan. Kasi meron akong na-obserbahan na slow piece stop during the match. And di rin ako nagulat dun sa mga slow piece shit na to. And since it's the first, I'm not going to score it na mababa. Let's say mababa daw. Pero parang hindi kasi siya nag-exceed sa expectation ko about the whole pay-per-view. And actually, hindi ko na nga dapat isasama to sa ratings mamaya. Na-rate natin yung pay-per-view. And the next match, it's Trey Miguel versus Steve Macklin for the Next Division Championship. So basically, itong match na to is hindi naman rematch. Excuse me. Hindi siya rematch eh. Parang to eh, first time din siya. Kaya lang, ito yung, tawad ba dito? May stipulation na dito eh. Kung matatalo si Macklin, hindi pa siya makakalaban ulit sa Division title as long as si Macklin, si Trey Miguel yung champion. So, maganda yung touch about the match. Kaya lang hindi ako ganong impressed on what the hell they did on Steve Macklin and he got his first loss on Trey. Regardless, maganda yung laban, no? Naganda na ako sa laban. Kaya lang, syempre, it ruins the flow of or the, tawag ba dito? Run up a wrestler para sa akin, eh. Parang, kung magbabago yung momentum mo sa isang laban o magbabago yung momentum mo after ng isang malaking laban, siyempre downgrade yun. Diba, nakakaano, upset them. Sige, let's talk about the first main event of the pay-per-view. I can say this as the first main event. Tinapat lang nila to doon sa Battle of the Belts na nangyari last Saturday. Sunday din. Sunday din. So, it's the Ring of Honor Championship. It's Jonathan Gresham versus Chris Sabin for the Ring of Honor World Championship. So, tinapat nila to sa Battle of the Belts, of course, AEW. Kami naman yun. Ano yung nangyari doon, mamaya i-recap na lang natin. So, that's a pretty good pay-per-view match between both of them. And para sa akin, kahit sa mga Impact ito yung isa sa mga pinakamagandang match na napanood on Impact TV or Impact pay-per-view. Parang dating ka sa akin to, hindi binukto ng Impact. Obviously, hindi to binukto ng Impact. But since naganap siya sa Impact ring, we can consider it sa Impact match na ginawa mismo sa Impact since kanila nga yun. Parang akala mo, nanonood ka ng Ring of Honor, nanonood ka ng NXT. Inside the Ring of Honor ring, dagdag mo pa si Tom Hanipan from Philips dun sa commentary. Parang nakadagdag siya sa exciting about the match. Kaya sobrang ganda rin ang dating sa akin ng laban na yun. And I love it. Kahit naman siniguro sa inyo, magagandahan din dito sa laban eh. Oo. And next, it's Josh Alexander versus Jonah Rock or Jonah lang dito sa Impact. So for me, Jonah versus Alexander is definitely one of the most important matches of the night. And definitely one of the most, ito sabihin ko agad na, ito yung mga sleeper matches na hindi nyo dapat tulugan. Alam mo nyo? Ganun yung tato ko dito. Is ito sleeper match to na hindi nyo dapat tulugan eh. Hindi nyo dapat natulugan during the pay-per-view. Because it's pretty damn good for somebody na na-release Jonah and sa isang wrestler na sobrang tagal na sa Impact and he got his shot and sobrang solid nung ginawa nilang 20-minute match at least na yun. And para sa akin, right winner din since binibuild din nila si Josh for a program with Moose soon. And yun, makes sense for me. And then, we got a 10-man tawag ba dito? hardcore war between the Good Brothers, Violent by Design versus tawag ba dito? Sila Rhino, Heat, Rich Swan, sino pa ba tong dalawa? The Edwards. Tsaka sino? Nakalimutan ko yung isa. Teka, nakalimutan ko yung isa. Basta yun, that's a 5-on-5 match din. Hindi ko lang maalala kung sino. Teka. So, if you figure out ko siya whole program. Pero di ko tanda yung isa. Ang ina kasi Impact, di kasi ako nanonood lately. Kaya, nag-expose na ako ng sarili ko. Basta yan. That's a 10-man war. Hardcore war. Parang ang concept niya is war games but without the structure. Personally, I like this. Para dun sa lockdown ginagawa nila recently sa matches. Yung lockdown nga lang sobrang infamous. Infamous kasi parang ang tawag ba dito? Nakalimutan ko yung term eh. Parang ito yung mas sumikat sa Impact. And since ito rin yung parang gold age ng Impact Wrestling. So that's why ito yung mas kilala. And nung una kasi hindi ako sanay sa format itong hardcore war na to. Ngayon na kasi ang gulo. Parang naglagay ka ng Royal Rumble. Tapos yung dagbo pa yung sunod-sunod na paglabas ng entrances. Ang weird. Unang ang weird. Pero ba't tumatagal? I can say, okay. Now I know. Ang weird lang ng ganong format. Ang una. Ang weird ng ganon. Sige. So, that's a good match for me. And parang ang dating lang sa akin, isang problema lang ako na gusto kong i-address. Parang nalito lang talaga ako on kung paano nagra-run yung match. Akala ko that's a war match, typically na 10-man tag team with no holds, no DQ, gano'n. Gano'n yung akala ko, pero no, he gave us a distraction. Ah, man, that's a good shit. And then, one of the two main events of the evening, actually three, it's the triple threat match for the Impact Arrow. So, it's Moose at Cardona and W. Morrissey versus, yan, triple threat. Moose, Morrissey, saka si Cardona. Yun nga, triple threat. For me, itong match na to, kung ito yung main event nyo, parang ang basura ng dating sa akin. So, I'm glad na ilagay nila yung Mickie Diona as the main event. Since ito rin yung may hype, may explain natin yung Royal Rumble hype. Diona match daw. So, mamaya natin i-explain yan, syempre. Let's talk about Impact Arrow. Impact Arrow, medyo bitin ako eh. Alam ko may program pa to in the future, but not for now. Pero, ang ina-expect ko kasi, Cardona will pin si Morrissey. Pero hindi, nag-iba yung nangyari. Ang napin dito tuloy is si Cardona. Si Cardona yung may pinakamalaking factor on this whole scenario aside si Moose. Not definitely Morrissey. Si Morrissey kasi andyan lang yan. Pwesa dito the pin. Diba? And wala eh. Parang ang lumalabas dito, they are going to continue the most. Parang ang lumalabas, they're going to continue the Moose tsaka yung Cardona story. And eventually, pagkatalo si Cardona, punta siya NWA. Na. And finally, the main event of the evening, it's Deonna Purrazzo versus Mickie James in a Texas Death Match. Ang una, kamot ulo ako dito. For real. Real talk. Kamot ulo talaga ako dito. Almost 15 minutes of the match, kamot ulo ako. Kasi, di maliwanag yung stipulation eh. And parang ipipin mo muna at mga 1, 2, 3. Tapos, saka mo bibilangan. Parang labo for me ng ganong stip. Kasi nung naalala ko, may Texas Death Match din sa New Japan. Hindi naman ganito. Parang ang ginawa nila is last man standing. Yun din ang alam ko na susundin nila. Hindi eh. Hindi nila sinunod yung ganong stip. Parang ang labo. Labo nung dating sa akin. Kaya, pangitan din ako syempre. Sino bang hindi ako papangitan doon? Diba? Regardless, maganda naman yung naging laban nila. And syempre, nag-expect rin tayo na Mickie James will win the match because of the Royal Rumble hype. Bago rin ako ng predictions nun, if I remember. And yun basically ang naging udyat para manalo si Mickie, and yun din ang magiging panalo ni Mickie. And of course, pupunta si Mickie dun sa Royal Rumble as the Knockouts Champion. I don't know lang if dadalhin niya yung belt. Mamaya explain ko sa second half yung thoughts ko and the details pa on the Royal Rumble. Pero for now, rate na tayo. So, rate natin yung Hard to Kill, pay-per-view, the Knockouts Ultimate X. The X division is 3 piece, 3 to 5. Ring of Honor title, 5/5. The Alexander Jonah and the 10-man Hardcore War is 4 to 5. The triple threat is 3. Bitin ako talaga dito. And the death match is 4 out of 5. Ayan, yun lang. So, for now, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, pag-uusapan natin, we're going to do New Japan Pro Wrestling sa Wrestle Kingdom recap. I'm not going to do a full review on this kasi sobrang haba nito. 3 nights to. Tangina. And 2 nights lang yung pagtutuunan natin ngayon. Kasi yung night 3, wala tarantado yung night 3. Tinamad na ako manood. Kaya 2 nights lang muna. Yun, so we're going to take a break. When we come back, pasok Kingdom 16. Ating pagtutuunan, of course, summary lang to. I'm going to do a review. And for now, let's check our other podcast here on Pipe Network.
You are listening to the MTG Show podcast, an unfiltered Tagalog wrestling podcast where they talk about anything and everything about professional wrestling. Speaking of professional, we are professionally going to segue to our own show, Rule 20 Podcast, where the only professional thing we do are done mostly off the record, behind the cam, and under the sheets. Again, that's Rule 20, available wherever you are listening to this right now. And now back to the podcast.
Dear listener, have you ever had a complicated situation with someone you love? I'm not a relationship expert, but I sure have gone through a handful of ups and downs with my own relationships. So I invite you to join in the conversation in my podcast, Sincerely Yours, where we'll talk about the discreet things we do in relationships that harm us. Some may be hard to admit to ourselves, but that's the road to building healthy relationships. I hope to see you there. Sincerely yours, Maria.
Okay, we're back. We're back on the podcast. So, yun. Paus agad ako. Tanginang yan. Buisit. Sige, let's continue with our Wrestle Kingdom Night 1 and Night 2. Summary. Kasi dito natin isasama yung review natin sa main roster sa half na to ng podcast. Sige. Let's start with our summary Night 1. So obviously sabi ko nga summary kasi di ko ibubuo kasi sobrang haba ng Wrestle Kingdom. 5 hours yun, tangina. And admit, di ko lahat panood kasi number 1, wala parang ang haba Di nakaya ng mata ko yung 4 hours na yun. And nag-aanda rin kami nun sa kasal. So, unfortunately, hindi ko siya napanood ng buo. Pinanood ko ulit siya ngayon before the recording. And at last 4 yung pinanood ko. So, kung ano yung matatandaan na may memorya ko, yun yung sabihin ko ngayon. So, sige. Let's start the night 1 summary. So, syempre, pag mag-summary tayo, hindi natin pwede kalimutan yung Shibata. So, si Shibata, nag-return, of course. And then, sinabi niya dito na mag-full wrestling match. Siya, hindi na yung grappling lang. In-announce previously before the pay-per-view. And it's a nice touch for me on that match. Personally, mas gusto ko to para dun sa huling match niya before Wrestle Kingdom. And that's a pretty big touch for me dun sa Wrestle Kingdom event. Parang ang disaster kasi nagdating sa akin nung pinanood ko to. Una, upset win. Pangalawa, DQ. Pangatlo, okay lang. Pangapat, ito yung banger. Definitely, kung kay Shibata, that's a good match for me. And then, let's move on to the tag titles. Actually, hindi ako nag-expect ng tyro change. But, hindi nga nag-tyro change. That's a nice nag-tyro change, di ba? Oo, nag-tyro change pala. I'm sorry, nag-tyro change pala. And I'm glad na, sino nga yung nanalo? Nakalimutan ko. Tama nga, nag-tyro change nga dito. I'm glad na Chaos yung nanalo dito sa match. Di ko tanda yung mga pangalan kasi di ko na notes. Forgot to note it, to be honest. And basta I know Chaos yung nanalo Tapos, ang isang pagkakamali ko lang about the match is ang ginawa ko kasi medyo mas nag-focus ako sa last week. Kaya yung sa mga iniwan ko. Siyempre yung Key-Evil pinanood ko. Yung Tag Tyros din nag-aano. Yung Key-Evil naman, in the other hand, ito Ito yung tipo na pwede mo ng tulugan eh. Oo. Got his win, but may pakeba sa panalo. Ay, gago. Seriously, man. As much as hope you guys love Evil, pero hindi ganong entertain yung match at all. At saka yung mga commentators sa English. Wala sila pakik-Evil. Parang wala nga lang tong match eh. Formality lang to eh. Oo, totoo naman eh. Formality lang talaga. And then, let's move on to the tag- junior tag ba? Hindi. It's the junior heavyweight title. So, it's El Desperado versus Hiromu Takahashi. Man. It's definitely a banger for me. Man. If may re-recommend ako from day one aside sa doon sa Okada, Shingo, ito definitely is a must watch. Yung kay Shibata. No? For me, that match, Desperado and Takahashi, parang ang dating sa akin ito yun eh. Parang nanood ka ng pay-per-view, one sitting, tapos isa lang, tatlo yung napanood mo laban. Ito, isang laban lang, banger agad eh. Hindi yung tatlong WWE pay-per-view matches yung napanood mo na basura naman. Ito, hindi ko mapapagod eh. Oo. Ganun lang yung comparison ko. And for me, di ako nag-expect man ng title change. And yun nga, nangyari, di nga nanalo si Takahashi dito. Which just makes sense naman for me kasi bago pa lang yung title. Tama ba ako? Bago lang ba? Hindi ko alam. Kasi di ako updated sa New Japan late. So, yeah. Yun lang. And then finally, Sasuke Okada versus Shingo Takagi for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. The first title defense of event. Kasi dalawa yun. So, I'm glad Okada won the belt. But at the same time, feel bad for Shingo kasi doon sa day 2 ng pay-per-view event, na-kick off siya eh. Tangin dark match siya nilagay. I feel bad for that. But on decision din, ang pag-uusapan na it's time to put Tyro to a champion, credible. Hindi naman sinasabing na hindi credible si Shingo, ano. Pero para sa akin kasi ang dating ni Okada, ito yung John Cena ng New Japan. If ikukumpara natin sa New Japan, John Cena, definitely si Okada yung guy na yun. And that's why Okada won that championship. And mixed emotions ako if he deserves it. If kung gusto ko na manalo si Shingo. Ako kasi talaga gusto ko manalo si Shingo. Personally. So, wala eh. I feel bad for him for that. But, may natin na-explain yung isa pa. Yung importante sa day 2. So, sige, day 2 tayo. So, let's start with Minoru Suzuki winning the KOPW Transitional Championship. KOPW 2022. Para sa akin, sobrang unexpected ito. I thought na evil ulit. Si Yano ulit yung mananalo ng transitional na to. Pero hindi. That's a lie, guys. That's a lie. And to be honest, hindi na rin ako na akala ko talaga mare-retain pa yun si Chase. Pero, no. It's Suzuki's time, I guess. Sana bigyan siya ng tiro ulit. I wish. And yun. And then, let's move on to Tetsuya Naito versus Jeff Cobb. Para sa akin, ito yung head, sa mga head-to-head matches ng LIJ. Ito yung isa sa mga nagustuhan ko talaga eh. Oo. Ng LIJ at saka ng Empire. United Empire. Para sa akin, ito yung isa sa mga nagustuhan ko na match. And para sa akin din, mas nakita natin potential tsaka yung aggressiveness ni Jeff Cobb in this match. And kahit paano naman mas maganda yung kinalabasan nito kumpara dun kay Sanada saka kay Great Okan, 'di ba? Oo. And then move on tayo. So we got the co-main event Tanahashi versus Kenta for the US title o DQ. Para sa akin lang medyo bitin ng konti. Konting-konti lang bitin ako sa match na yun nila Tanahashi at ni Kenta. Kasi parang yung presentation nila nung night 1 dun sa 6-man tag, parang di natin nakita ng buo yung aggressiveness ni Tana. Although, must say na at least this age, kaya niya pa mag-reso ng ganong katagal. Oh, ang tagal din nun. And yung spot sa end, yung high fly low dun sa dulo, man, that's sick. Sobrang ganda ng spot na yun. Oo. Yun lang ang aking thoughts on Tanahashi and Kenta. Finally, the main event, it's Okada, obviously the second match of the event, versus Will Ospreay, self-proclaimed IWGP champion. So, sorpresa ba ako? Hindi. Obviously, hindi. Parang ang dating lang sa akin nito is formality na lang 'to, eh. Kasi 'di naman champion si Ospreay in the first place, and obviously they had to relinquish the belt, of course, and then yun nga napunta kay Shingo and then Okada. And regardless, and comparison na nga lang para matapos na tayo dito sa Wrestle Kingdom kasi magda-divert na tayo to Raw. Yung dalawang match kapag kukumpara natin, gusto ko yung nangyari sa night 2 kay Ospreay. Hindi naman sasabihin natin na mas maganda lang yung lumaban si Ospreay. Pero maganda rin yung laban nung night 1 kay Shingo. Pero to be honest, mas maganda lang talaga yung chemistry ni Okada at saka ni Ospreay. Not saying pangit din, Tangina nun baka marami akong ma-offend din. Sige na. So, i-rate na lang natin yung matches doon sa Wrestle Kingdom. Night 1 and 2. Night 3, siguro sa ibang araw na lang. So, yung kay Io at saka kay Shaw, it's 3-5. Bullet Club versus Tanahashi and Company. Hindi ko na siya ni-rate kasi di ko din kinalabasan. Yan. And then Empire versus LIJ na 6-man tag. It's 3-5. And then yung Ishibata 4. Evil versus Tomorrow Ishii. Ganun na rate. And then the junior heavyweight title, El Desperado versus Romo Takahashi. It's 4-5. Then the main event, night 1, si Okada, kay Shingo, it's 5/5. And then night 2, junior tag team titles, triple threat rules, it's 3. I don't know, I hate the part na, ba dito? May na DQ, if I remember, it's Bullet Club. And then the Stardom match, it's, di ko na ni-rate kasi singles lang naman to. And di siya makaka-apekto sa ibang matches sa New Japan. And then the KOPW, di ko siya ni-rate, but Minoru Suzuki definitely deserves it. And then the Sanada and Great Okan match, it's 3. Naito Jeff Cobb is 4. Tanahashi and Kenta 5. Okada and Ospreay is 5.5/5. Man, personal thoughts on Wrestle Kingdom before we move on to Raw. Special message real quick lang tayo before we continue. Parang mas nagustuhan ko to isa sa 14, 15, pero in different aspects naman. Kasi mas maganda yung run ni Naito dun sa Tyro Dash and yung kay Ospreay tuloy. Yung kay nga 'to, Kota Ibushi naman, maganda rin yung run niya kaya lang, wala, injured talaga si Gago, eh. Wala tayong magagawa, sayang yun. Yun lang ang ating thoughts for Wrestle Kingdom 15 and we're going to do our Raw review. Basically, Raw review na tayo and NXT 2.0 bago tayo mag-commercial ulit. So, let's start with Raw. Para sa akin, sobrang impressed ako on the Lashley thing and Brock kasi parang, parehas silang aggressive plus the messages from both of them, parang sobrang grabe yun, puta. And, ayan, and now na-impress na sobra kay Brock. Kung napanood niyo yung promo niya, full promo niya for the past 2-3 weeks, man, that's the Brock I want, I swear. Yun ang gustong-gusto kong makita sa TV, kay Brock. And we got that 3 weeks. Nakuha natin yun in 3 fucking weeks. Day 1, the Raw after day 1, and now after day 1 week after day 1. And now, mag-move on na tayo. So speaking of day 1, we got a new active champion sa pagkatao nga ng Alpha Academy. Para sa akin, they deserve it. And definitely mag-move na tayo. Kailangan natin mag-move on dun sa RK Bro. Since para sa akin, ang dadating kasi sa akin ng RK Bro, it's a random type talaga. At least yung kina Otis, kay, ako pa dito, Chad Gable, teka lang. Mas maganda talaga yung chemistry nilang dalawa kumpara kina Orton at kay Riddle. Maganda rin yung kina Riddle kaya lang hindi talaga sila tag. Maybe ito na rin yung seeds papunta dun sa heel turn. Sino man mag-heel turn sa kanila, but obviously it's Randy Orton. Malamang sa malamang may rematch tayo for the Royal Rumble and then another on Saudi siguro kasi may Saudi event. Then malamang sa malamang doon na tayo makakahanap ng heel turn for Randy or Riddle kung sino man sa kanilang dalawa doon sa program nila for WrestleMania. And then, so we got Big E versus Seth Rollins match. Personally, I love this shit. And definitely, kung ito yung program natin for day 1, okay lang sa akin. Tanggap ko kung ganun. Ito yung naging match. Kung ganito yung original match for day 1, ito yung nangyari. Man, I love this. I love this shit. And then we got the Nikki ASH and Rhea Ripley turn. Ayun, so nag-turn si Nikki ASH and wala na, nag-split na yung tag team nila na random. So, question, magandaan ba ako sa heel turn? Oh, nagandaan ako sa heel turn, I swear. Sobrang up na din kasi nung run ni Nikki ASH. Nikki ASH, on the point na wala na, boredom na talaga naramdaman ko on her run. And di ko rin masisisi talaga yung fans kasi tagal na rin nilang pinaplop. And yung swerve na hindi si Rhea yung nag-turn, doon ako talaga nagulat. Yun talaga yung kagulat-gulat na, wow, hindi pala si Rhea yung nag-turn. Okay, let's see. Makikita ba natin yung bagong Nikki ASH? Maybe not for now. Pero mag-grow yan eh. Diba? Mag-grow yan habang tumatagal. And makikita pa natin yung bad side niya until makita ulit natin si Nikki Cross. So that's a good match. And then finally, the main event of this week's Raw, it's a triple threat match. So it's Doudrop versus Liv Morgan versus Bianca Belair. So Doudrop winning the match makes sense to me. So it sets up for Becky Lynch versus Doudrop at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view or premium live event na heel versus heel ulit. So technically, heel versus heel to kasi heel si Becky, majority heel, and si Doudrop ay heel din. I don't know kung ano yung magiging plano nila, may 2 weeks pa naman for the Royal Rumble. So, For me, lumalabas na lang talaga isang bagay lang. Si Liv Morgan ay yung mananalo ng Royal Rumble. Yan talaga ang parating sa akin. So, let's move on to SmackDown. SmackDown na muna mamaya ng NXT sa second half ng segmento to. So, sige, let's start with SmackDown. So, nagkaroon nga ng confrontation si Brock at saka si Roman. Roman wala nang kasama kahit sino. And nag-propose ng ideya si Brock for a Tyro versus Tyro match at WrestleMania. And nag-decline si Roman. So, it means no for now. Maybe yes for later. And yung questionable kasi dito is yung loyalty ni Paul Heyman. So, siguro sa Royal Rumble, nakikita natin yung loyalty niya. Kung sama ba talaga siya kay Brock or parang ginagamit niya lang si Brock para mas ma-hypnotize siya, ma-mind games. And then eventually babalik siya kay Roman, parang set up. Ganun yung pwede mangyari on this thing. And then we got a Charlotte announcement na magko-compete daw siya sa Royal Rumble. So 19 out of 20 na yung in-announce for the Women's Royal Rumble. And apparently, ang pinaka-importante kasi dito is yung pag-announce kay Mickie James. Mickie James is, sinabi na rin natin kanina na pero regardless on sino yung magiging knockouts champion on that, Mickie James will be part of the Royal Rumble this year. So it's a good decision sa akin. And sige, maganda pa dito, in-acknowledge siya ng WWE as the knockouts champion. And ito syempre yung magiging tanong nyo ngayon. Dadalhin ba ni Mickie James yung championship? Is Mickie James going to bring the championship at Royal Rumble? Answer? No. Obviously no. Sorry people. And speaking of Royal Rumble, let's talk about the rumor na lumabas na meron daw forbidden door na inopen for the men's Royal Rumble. So, ang iniisip ko kasi dito is if connected siya sa Impact, hulaan nyo na lang kung sino. Sino ba yung gusto nyong maging part ng Royal Rumble ngayon? Let me know on social media sa MT Show Pod, on Facebook, Twitter, IG, kung sino yung gusto nyong maging part ng Royal Rumble na hindi taga WWE. And then, we got the main event, street fight between the Usos and the New Day. Alam nyo, summary na lang kasi mahaba na rin yung segment na to. Parang, ang dating kasi sa akin ito, parang gin. O kaya parang alak. Habang tumatagal yung storage niya, lalong sumasarap. In this case, parang habang tumatagal na naglalaban sila, lalong gumaganda yung laban eh. Day 1, sakto lang yung laban. Ngayon, mas maganda syempre kasi no DQ to eh. Diba? No DQ tong laban. And syempre, nagamit na maganda yung time for the fight. And I'm glad na Usos won. Kasi wala rin naman pagtutunguhan if manalo sila Coffee. Aside from the ticket sales. And finally, on the last part of SmackDown, announced na Seth Rollins will fight Roman at the Royal Rumble. Siyempre, for the Universal Championship. Question, real quick, before we go to the commercial break ulit. So, simpleng question lang to eh. Possible ba na magkaroon ng unification at the Royal Rumble? The answer? No. Always be no. Huwag nyo nang isipin niya, yan, si Roman pupunta na yan ng Raw. O si Rollins. Ba? O si Rollins pupunta ng ST, si Brock pupunta ng Raw. And magpapalitan lang sila. kung magkakaroon ng title change between Rollins and Reigns, malamang si Rollins dadalhin yung title sa Raw. Brock dadalhin yung title sa SmackDown. So, ganun na yung setup moving forward dun sa dalawang championship. So, if may sense, may sense. Siyempre, may sense. No? And sige, that's basically it for our SmackDown and Raw review plus the Wrestle Kingdom 16 review, of course. And yun, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, itutuloy natin yung NXT 2.0 tsaka AEW. Of course, yung ating throwback Flashback Friday doon sa NXT UK pay-per-view. So, for now, let's check our other podcast here on Hype Network.
Gusto niya bang malaman kung paano kami nakikipag-collab sa mga brands in the MT Show podcast? We use Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast. If meron kang podcast, sign up now at podmetrics.co and use my code DMTGShowPod to get full control on how you monetize your show regarding of its size. Again, sign up now at podmetrics.co and use my code DMTGShowPod. If you're an advertiser who wants to collab with us, head on over to advertiser.podmetrics.co and fill up the form. Again, Podmetrics, the easiest way to monetize your podcast.
Sandy. Tara na, mag-record na tayo.
Okay, sige. Kuya.
This is 480 TV Pod.
The 482nd TV After Show Podcast.
This season, we are going to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Tune in every Sundays wherever you get your podcast
480 TV Pod.
from Pipe Network.
Sige na, manood ka na. Diyan ka naman magaling.
Okay. Welcome back to your Unfiltered Tagalog Wrestling Podcast. And this is MPJ Show Podcast, Wrestling Podcast. Before we continue on NXT 2.0 and AEW, I want to remind you you can shop on Shopee with helping this podcast. And you can support the podcast on your shopping on Shopee. And sunod din yung sales ng Shopee. So if you want to support the podcast, please use my link on Shopee. That's adlink.co/bhx. Again, that's Shopee adlink.co/bhx. So let's continue with our NXT 2.0 review real quick. So we got Crowbar on the pole match and good. Titan versus Tony D'Angelo TDA. And this is what I wanted, man. Expect na mananalo si Tony D'Angelo on this one. Pero ang dating kasi sa akin, as much as I love Titan, he deserves the pin. He deserves to lose. Kasi wala na rin naman. It's all about the new era of NXT at this point. Di na to black and gold. Di na to everything aside from NXT. It's all about the 2.0 talents. And Tony Angelo proved my point. He deserves to win the match. Definitely. And I love his gimmick as well. To be honest, Tony D'Angelo is one of the guys that I love in 2.0 right now aside from kay Braun Breaker tsaka kay Grayson Waller. Siyempre, sama din natin si Carmelo Hayes because Carmelo Hayes lays right now on 2.0. And then, konting recap lang on what happened on NXT 2.0 few days ago. So, it's New Year's Evil. So, konti lang. So, we got Braun Breaker winning the NXT Championship from Tommaso Ciampa. And then, Mandy Rose retaining the NXT Women's Championship. So, day off siya yung linggo. So, the match is a triple threat between Mandy, Dion, and Dion. Mandy, Raquel Gonzalez, and Cora Jade. Yan, maganda yung laban for me. And then the unification match between Roderick Strong and Carmelo Hayes for the unified NXT North American Championship. Regardless naman maganda yung laban for me. And then, move on na tayo sa isa sa mga importanteng segments nitong show. So, nireveal na nila si Wendy Chu, man. Former Maying sa kancha. Man, ito na yung Orange Cassidy ng WWE. Their counterpart ng OC. And, to be honest, I love this kumpara kay OC. Kasi si Wendy Chu, sobrang relatable niya. For whatever reason, sobrang relatable talaga ni Wendy Chu. Dali siya sundan. At sabihin niyo na, ano ba yung NXT ngayon, ganon, blah blah blah, stuff like that. Wala. Sobrang madaling i-follow ni Wendy Chu sa kanyang story. O yung kanyang gimmick. Sobrang daling sundan. Kaya masasabi mo talagang sobrang ganda ang booking niya. So, binog siya this week in a 6-man tag. Nag-compete siya parang tapos pag ayaw niya na, magta-tag na lang siya basta-basta. Tulog na lang siya doon sa ropes. That's it. Ang weird. Ang weird sa una pero magustuhan yung booking na yun. Sobrang ganda kasi. Interesting ako sa mga susunod na hakbang kay Wendy Chu on NXT 2.0. And then, we got the main event of this week. So, it's AJ Styles versus Grayson Waller. Personally, I love this Styles match. So, I guess narrative si Styles for momentum. And I'm glad that he won, of course. But props to Jake, to Waller, Grayson Waller. Kasi maganda rin yung naging performance niya on this match. And kahit talo si Grayson dito, parang maganda yung naging rub niya on Styles. And he deserves that motherfucking rub if you're going to ask me. Sobrang solid din kasi talaga. And then, let's move on. Medyo laylay tayo ng konti. So, dagdag natin before we continue to Dynamite. Nag-return din si LA Knight after nung match. So, technically, may return na nangyari dito. At assault niya si Grayson Waller. So, magtutuloy-tuloy yung feud nila na iniwan, I think, on December when Grayson attacked LA Knight from behind and then tinakas niya yung kotse. So, yun, mag-continue yung story na yun. And then, let's move on to AEW. But before we move on to AEW Dynamite this week, let's talk about Battle of the Belt. So, story is simple. Taong December at New Year's Smash, naging AEW champion si Cody by beating Sammy Guevara, former champion, for the TNT title. And both us are angry for it. Pero wala eh. Galit talaga tayo lahat and tinatawa si Sisi. Fun fact of yung comments nung sinelebrate championship ni Cody. And lahat naman talaga magagalit. And then, noong Battle of the Belts, nagkaroon nga ng announcement si Cody daw ay isolate kasi may COVID positive siyang nakasama. So, he has to do protocol. And nagkaroon nga ng interim anti-champion sa pagkatao ni Sammy Guevara. So, Sammy Guevara defeated si Dustin Rhodes on Battle of the Belts last week. Hard to kill din. Sabay ng hard to kill. So, that's a really good match. And then, after of the match, lumabas si Daniel Garcia. Yun lang basically for Battle of the Belts. Let's move on to Dynamite. This episode of Dynamite. So, na ngayon si Adam Cole at si Britt Baker. So, tapos na yung feud niya versus Britt. So it makes sense na random-random muna siya with Adam Cole and the Young Bucks and UE, whatever, kung naman pangalan nila ngayon. And it makes sense naman. It makes sense. Sorry kung robot-robot na yung boses ko kasi nawawalan na ako ng boses. Wow. First time ko magganito. Sobrang meh. That's the right voice. Talaga. Sana mawalan ako ng boses every week. So ayoko. No. That's not a good idea. Sige, let's continue with CM Punk versus Wardlow. Man, imagine mo magpasampung powerbomb ka, tapos nanalo ka pa. Anong feeling ng anong katangang booking? Ask him for a friend. And, be honest, okay lang sa akin. Kasi, tungo din naman tayo dun sa heel turn ni Punk. Heel turn ni Punk. Yung turn ni Wardlow eventually kay MJF after siguro ng match versus CM Punk pagkatapos na yung match and the feud. And ang weird kasi pakinggan na nasampung powerbomb ka tapos na-roll up ka lang, panalo ka na agad, talo ka pa. Nakakagago, di ba? And then, so, speaking of AW, so Brody King is, sorry, so Brody King is now all elite. Para sa akin, magandang ano yun, magandang move yun. Si Brody King from Ring of Honor. Habang wala pang Ring of Honor. And in-introduce siya as a tag team partner kay Malaki Black. And for me, that's a pretty good naman. Maganda siyang touch for this week's Dynamite. And then, so we got the main event for this week. So it's Sammy Guevara versus Daniel Garcia for the interim TNT title. Na hindi naman dapat talaga nangyari in the first place. So it's stupid. Pero wala eh. We have to deal with it. So Sammy won the match. And after nun, lumabas si Jericho, lumabas si Eddie Kingston. And parang binuburo talaga nila na maglalaban yung dalawa in a later date, probably on pay-per-view. Sorry, wala talaga ako boses. So I had to summary everything remaining dito sa podcast. So maikli na lang to. Don't worry, maikli na lang to. So we got Jericho, Kingston. Posible din mangyari later on. And then, basically yun lang for AEW outside of the ring. So let's talk about Corey Graves real quick. So Corey Graves, excuse me. So after decade, almost a decade, man. Decade ba? Tama? Decade next year. Almost yan. Almost a decade. Clear na si Corey Graves sa in-ring action. Sana si Paige din. Si Paige and sino pa ba gusto ko ma-clear? So, daming wrestlers na di pa nakiklear ever since the Edge and DB. And now, na-clear na rin si Corey Graves. Sana pati si Paige ma-clear din for a return. Para kahit paano maganda rin makasabay din siya dun sa women's division. Of course, we want Paige on the women's side, of course. And then finally, a hour ago, na-scoop natin from SRS ng Fightful. So we're going to have a Saudi Elimination Chamber match for February pay-per-view. That's a Saudi event. And probably we're going to get more details on that on the Royal Rumble pay-per-view or premium live event. Lagi na lang kasi di pa ako sanay sa premium live event. So yun. So yun lang ang nilabas ni SRS for the Royal Rumble news and for the future of the Elimination Chamber. We don't know kung ang dadalhin nila na pay-per-view is just the Elimination Chamber pay-per-view or they're going to stick with the yung Super Showdown or team. Yun siguro ang gagawin nila for the Elimination Chamber return na to. So, sige. Real quick na lang for our UK segment na dapat mahaba. Pero iiklihan ko na kasi wala na akong boses. Fortunately, back up na ako. So, for me, nami-miss ko talaga yung UK. Personally, UK pay-per-views, UK, tawag pa dito? UK wrestling in general, Progress, ICW, mga panahon na gano'n nga. And NXT UK, of course, their pay-per-views. Man, sobrang nami-miss ko yung NXT UK. Especially, nangyari nga on naging anniversary recently, January 12, yung, tawag ba dito? Yung Blackpool 1 and Blackpool 2 doon sa mga takeover events na yun na wala na ngayon, unfortunately. Sobrang lungkot ko talaga na nawala na rin yung takeover. And I wish lang na sana magkaroon pa ng takeover sa susunod ano, takeover name on it. And yun, basically it. If tatanungin ko kayo pala, bago tayo matapos, ano yung pinaka nagustuhan nyo na NXT UK takeover match? Let me know on our social media and we're going to talk about that next week. Tutuloy natin itong discussion for the takeover. Siguro, akal natin. Akala ko talaga akong boses, man. Hindi ko na kaya magtuloy-tuloy. So, let's go to the picks of the week. So, we got the superstar of the week, which is Kazuchika Okada on his way at Wrestle Kingdom 16. Honorable mention, yung pinakamalapit is si Jonathan Gresham and Brock Lesnar. And then the woman of the week is Mickie James because of her announced and di na lang nagulat na announced appearance for the Royal Rumble and of course her match Hard Heel versus Deonna Purrazzo. And then the match of the week. Actually, if I can pick two, I'm going to pick two. So it's Okada Ospreay. Okada Ospreay from Wrestle Kingdom 16 and Gresham and Sabin match from Hard Heel pay-per-view. So next week, before we continue, before we end this episode, next week, baka i-review natin yung pay-per-view Terminus pay-per-view mag-take place on January 16. So 16, sama. So 16 nga, sama. Sunday Manila time. And sana mapanood natin yung pay-per-view. So, parang ROH kasi siya. And we're going to talk about continuation ng ating UK stuff and our favorite Royal Rumble moments. Siguro pag-usapan na rin natin because after that, we're going to talk about Royal Rumble predictions. At sunod-sunod na yan eh. Hanggang WrestleMania na yan eh. So, sige na. It's time to go. So, follow the podcast on all of the social media platforms. So, it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, on TikTok at the MTG Show Pod. You can support the podcast by rating the podcast 5 stars 6 on Spotify and on Apple Podcast. Is pinutin nyo lang yung rate show. Then makikita nyo doon, pwede nyo i-rate yan 5 stars. Para mas maganda yung 6. Para kuha tayo, happy tayo lahat. And then submit. And then, of course, you can support the podcast by following the podcast on all of the social media platforms. Of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and on TikTok. And then, syempre, supportahan nyo rin ang Pipe Network. Visit pipenetwork.o for more Pipe Network shows. And then, follow us on social media at Pipe Network. Pipe Network. And my personal social media platforms at AG Pedera on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So, it's time to go. Ano akong boses? Pasensya na. Ganito na yung nalabasan ng last portion nitong episode na to. So, remember, stay safe, stay reso. Please vote on May 9, 2022. Vote for the right guy or woman in 2022. And then, stay safe, pera. So, vaccine yourselves up. If meron kayong booster, please, magpa-booster kayo, utang na loob. And, yun lang. See you the next episode. If di nyo naman kailangan lumabas, huwag tayo lumabas kasi utang na loob. Grabe, taas lalo ng COVID cases ngayon dito sa Philippines. Okay, see you on the next episode. Peace.
Did you know that podcasts are the new radio? You can listen to your favorite shows anytime, anywhere on demand. Visit the Pilipinas Indie Podcast and Entertainment Network at pipenetwork.co to see our list of shows. And like us on Facebook to get updates on our latest episodes, events, promos, and freebies. The Pipe Network, taking podcasting to the next level.